Hello, and welcome to Eagles Keep. I'm your host, Bob Lingley, and today we're going to be talking about the topic of brotherly love. We're here on Pegasus TV, also on Eagles Keep channel on YouTube, and also post on Facebook on my page under Robert Lingley. We serve locally at the Bridge Metro West here in Natick, and there is a men's prayer every Saturday at 7 o'clock. So if you can join, it's only an hour on Saturday mornings. The guys usually catch coffee or breakfast locally. It's a nice time to get together. So the topic of brotherly love was brought to me back in 2005 when I was down in Lima, Peru on my second mission trip there after 2 weeks in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya. And the Lord brought to me the different level of loving your brother from the original command. So we're going to start with Matthew 22, the second greatest command, verse 35. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." In Luke 4, it says, "And he was his custom, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read." And as we want to stop here for a second and note that this is just after he come out of his temptation with Satan in the desert during a 40-day fast. And Satan tested him in body, soul, and spirit. And when he came out in the power of the Spirit and stood in the synagogue this day, we'll continue with verse 17. "And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And he had opened the book, and he found that the place where it was written." Verse 18, "And the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor, the gospel. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, and to proclaim liberty to the captives and the recovery of the sight who are blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." This is the foundation of what love is. It's ministering to others, giving your time to others. Then he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And that was challenged by some of the people that were there. Now, I'm going to share from a gentleman named Charles Krauthammer. If any of you used to watch Fox when he was alive back before the last election, he was a political commentator that originally started out as in Harvard as a psychiatry student, got crippled in a diving accident, still completed his MD, became a psychiatrist, but his love was for political comment. And so he was usually on most shows on most nights. And he wrote a series of essays called "The Point of It All." And on page 158 of that book, it's the illusion of self-love. And the essay starts out with a cabbie just out of prison sharing with his fare, who happens to be a professor, that he was happy with the help of psychotherapy and that he found his identity and learned to like himself. And Professor Bloom observes that a generation earlier, he would have found God and learned to despise himself. But rebuilding life in the spirit of humility is not the American way, the indispensable element of modern rehabilitation of the acquisition of self-love. You would think that narcissism, excessive and exclusive self-love might qualify as a vice. In fact, today's America, it might be the ultimate virtue, or more accurately, the prerequisite for all virtue. It is, after all, common and endlessly repeated wisdom that one cannot begin to love others until one has come to love himself. Krauthammer goes on to expound, saying that in the age of Donahue, the commandment is love thyself, then thy neighbor. This is a license for unremitting self-indulgence, since the request for self-love is never finished, and since the obligation to love others must be deferred while the search continues. This ideology of self-love enjoyed currency during the 70s as a form of psychic recreation to the me generation, and was resurrected as a cure for social pathologies of the 80s for the drug and other behavioral epidemics that ravage the nation to this day, particularly in the inner cities. Krauthammer continues on to say that conventional wisdom is that people are acting so self-destructively because of the absence of self-worth. Until they can learn to love themselves, they will continue to damage both themselves and others. He describes a riveting example in a Ted Koppel story of the Washington drug epidemic, and one speaker, a woman who admitted she was an addict, an ex-con, and a failed parent, and whose son he had grown up illiterate and disabled while she was addicted, and he was recently killed in a local drug war. She was now struggling to learn how to value herself, and while her plea to the mayor and the audience was, make me know that I am worth fighting for, make me feel like I can do it, Krauthammer goes on to explain that if the problem of the destitute is that of self-worth, then all we need is some good old psychotherapy and a few I am somebody resuscitations, and we're on our way. But Daniel Moynihan pointed out recently that in an inner city, there's an alarming new trend, a descent from single-parent to no-parent families as mothers are engulfed in the drug culture. We're producing a generation of orphans. Societies have occasional success bringing up orphans, but on a large scale, it is a losing opposition. This welfare state is originally called upon to supplement families and is now called upon to substitute for them. That is clearly impossible. The state cannot undo the devastation that comes from parental abandonment, nor is it equipped to train parents. A woman stated, "What can you do to help me be something I've never been? A parent." The answer properly is almost nothing. The state can give you daycare, food stamps, and supplement your income, and teaching a mother to be a mother is something that the state is not designed to do. And if the community and the family does not step up to this position and authority, it does not get done. The harm that results is undone by mantras about self-worth. Indeed, today's conventional wisdom that drug abuse and alcoholism and sexual irresponsibility come from an absence of self-worth is precisely wrong. Drugs and sex and alcohol have one thing in common: they yield to intense and immediate pleasure. That's why people do them. Indulgence is what used to be called vices, is an act of excessive self-love. It requires such regard for one's own immediate well-being as to be obvious to any harm oblivious to any harm that the indulgence causes others, even one's own children. The answer to the two women's questions is first, that there is no way the state can make you love yourself or your child. And the second, even if there were, loving yourself certainly is not the problem, nor is loving your child. Every mother loves her child. That's what she's created for. What is hard is to sacrifice for the child or your neighbor. And that requires not self-love, but it requires self-denial. There are groups like LGBTQYXYZ squared, cosine, question mark, and BLM and others, all demanding people love and respect them. What's up with that? We will see here in the following text, Jesus has shown us the opposite of where the world goes with this. And in the ministry of being a father to his followers, in showing what true love is, to the point of his disciples identifying him in the dark by his smell. That's how intimate they were. And that was secession taught by Rabbi Abir Hall. In John 13, it starts the 5-chapter dissertation the night of the Last Supper, just before he goes to the garden and prays, gets arrested, and goes to trial, and then the cross in the morning. And now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God, was going to God, rose from the supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself, and after that he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, "Lord, you are washing my feet?" Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this." And Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered and said, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." And he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who sent greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, blessed are you who do them. On a side note, the washing of the feet in that social society of that time was the lowest form of servitude, even below that of what you know as a slave. And think about cleaning all the dust and camel remnants out of people's toes. They're walking around for miles and miles and days, so cleaning their feet wasn't a pleasant thing. So Jesus is trying to say that he came to serve us and to show us that we were created to serve others, put others before ourselves. The new commandment, verse 31, so when he, Judas the betrayer, had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify in himself and glorify him. Immediately, little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I'm going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. That's a different level of love than loving oneself or loving your neighbors oneself. A deeper love for your brother is what God has called for. And this is after 3.5 years of demonstrating it daily. And in verse 14, it starts out in verse 1, let your heart not be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If I were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And now I have told you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me. But the world may know that I love the Father, as the Father gave me commandments, so I do. Arise, let us go from here. In John 15, verse 7, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. But this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and you will be my disciples. Love and joy perfected. As the Father loved me, I also loved you. Abide in my love. And if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has none than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all things that I've heard from my Father have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. These things will be given to you. Robin Bullock, in a section, compromise is the formula of corruption. While love, on the other hand, never thinks of itself. Love fights to keep the path of your destiny wide and open so that you can achieve everything that God has for you. Love keeps the path of success open for you. The disciple who loved Jesus. Now we're going to start with John. We're in the book of John, and he referred to himself as the one that Jesus loved. He was the one of the sons of thunder, one of the three of the inner circle, present at the Mount of Transfiguration, one of the three present at the rising of the synagogue leader's daughter who died, closest to Jesus at the Last Supper, and the only one Jesus told who the betrayer was. One of the three at the Garden of Gethsemane, while Jesus asked him to pray for him while his arrest team was on its way, and he was the only one allowed into the illegal trial where they mocked Jesus and prepared him to go to the cross and be crucified. He was also given the responsibility to Mary, Jesus' mother, from the cross, from the time of Jesus' death onward. And John was the only one given the complete book of Revelation, the book that caps off the Bible. And in John 13, now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him, asked who it was of whom he spoke, and then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, Lord, who is it? It is ironic how the Catholic Church considers Peter the first pope when he denied Jesus 3 times after bragging how religious he was and how he would never leave Jesus' side. And John referred to himself as the one who Jesus loved. He did more resting in knowing that God loved him than running around bragging how religious he was. And this John received so much more when he realized that Jesus loved him, and he rested in that. Now, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple who Jesus loved standing by, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. And he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. In chapter 20, while it was still dark and saw that they saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb, then she ran to Simon Peter, to the other disciples whom Jesus loved, and said to them, They have taken away the Lord of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. In verse 33 of chapter 23, and when they had come to the place called Calvary, where they crucified him, and the criminals, one on one side and one on the left, and Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In Philemon 1, so right before we start the Philemon, he's on the cross. He's given up his life, and there's two criminals, and one realizes that this guy is innocent, that he is the Christ, and the other one still mocks him. And that shows the difference between people. They're either one side or the other. Jesus came down to allow us to make a decision for or against him, his family, and his kingdom. And he said to the one that knew that he was innocent, he said, today you will be with me in paradise. And I also find it ironic in the movie, the Passion, that our friend Mel Gibson made. At the end, there was a raven comes down and picks out the eyeball of the criminal that mocks him. And I said, that's odd. And I found it. It says that the eye of the insolent child will be eaten by the raven. So in Philemon 1, verse 3, it says, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine making a request for you all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Just that it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in chains and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you are partakers of me, of this grace. And for God is my witness how greatly I long for you all with the affection of Jesus Christ. And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and all discernment, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere. In John 17, the last chapter before he leaves for the garden, it's Jesus' prayer to the Father. And in verse 24, Father, I desire that they also whom you gave me may be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory which you have given me. For you loved me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, the world does not know you, but I have known you, and these have known that you sent me, and I have declared to them your name, and will declare it, that the love with which you love me may be in them, and I in them. And John 21, 15 through 17. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. And he said to him again, second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. In verse 17, he said to him, the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said it to him the third time. Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. And so right here, this is his answer. 3 times he brings confirmation to the 3 times Peter denied him. He restores them 3 times. And it also shows that the one thing God has put into him in design of demonstration 3.5 years, and by his very words and his very actions, that the love that Jesus wants Peter to have is to minister to others, to encourage others, to speak healing to others. In Psalm 45:1, it says, my heart is overflowing with a good theme. I receive my compositions concerning the King. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. When the Lord talks to me in the morning, I always have out my journal and my Bible open, and most days I'm looking for great revelation, something like I've read in the Bible year after year. But it's more often, it is how much he says that he loves his son, me. And when I look into the mirror and do not see any reason why he should, and he chronically proclaims his love for every morning to remind me that he died on the cross for this love and this intimate relationship that he desires to have with each and every one of us. In Luke 15, verse 11, he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me a portion of goods that falls to me. In other words, he wanted his inheritance now. He didn't want his father to die. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country where he wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. So he wasted all the money he had on partying, whatever he was into. And now there's come a time where he came to his senses because he was feeding pigs, unclean animals, and he couldn't even eat the pods that he was feeding them. So he arose and came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, I want to expound on this, while he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion on him and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the father said to him, I've sinned against you. The son says, I've sinned against you and in your sight, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf here, kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this is my son, who is dead and is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. Are you away from Jesus today? I want to expound on a story that I learned when I was in the Dennis Kramer prophetic school. And there was a time when he was speaking to a congregation, and everyone's waiting for him to speak. And the Lord is saying, just proclaim macaroni and cheese. And he's wrestled with the Lord. Everyone was wondering why he was keeping silent. They're all waiting for, specific and personal prophecies. And he wrestled. He finally said, okay, I will comply. I don't want to look like a fool, but it's what you want me to say. So he proclaims macaroni and cheese. He goes on with the evening, and later on a woman comes up to him, and she says, macaroni and cheese meant a lot to me. And he says, I don't understand. She says, I haven't seen my son 20 years. I don't know if he's alive or dead. She says, but his favorite meal was macaroni and cheese. And every Sunday I lay it out on a dinner table, hoping he'll come through the door. Are you away from Jesus? Have you strayed from his loving relationship? Because even with that old woman, he was saying to her, I know what's in your heart and how your heart aches for your son. Jesus knows the ache of our heart. He knows the cries of our heart. He knows our depression. He knows our anger. He knows our frustrations. And we have yet to really come to him. We go to the world to try and dump that stuff out on gambling and drugs and sports and fast cars, whatever you want, whatever you're into, we run from him. In America, I met a prophet from Uganda at a conference at the Bridge, and he says, the problem with you people in America, we see raisings from the dead. We see people healed. We have the Muslims pay double the rent and drive us into the jungle so we have no buildings to worship in. But we see miracles all the time. He says, the problem in America, you go to God last. You got Obamacare, you got doctors, you got therapists, you got gyms. He says you got everything, all the drugs in the world, but you go to God last. That's why you don't see the miracles of the intimate relationship brings. So I'm going to ask you today, do you know Jesus? Have you strayed from him? Do you want to know him? Let me pray. In the name of Jesus, I just lift up the hearts and minds of all those who are watching and listening, Lord Jesus, that you come and visit them in their night season, that you show them that you're real, that you show them that you're missing them. You made them to be your children, and parents miss their children when they're gone. And just show them that. Speak to their hearts, Lord Jesus, and bring them to that new level. Bring them to that place that they become what you've created them to be. That you said, I've created you a prophet to the nations. That we all have a word to share with someone else, to bring them to a new level, to bring them healing and peace. So I thank you for watching. Please subscribe on YouTube. And if you're in the neighborhood stopping at the bridge on Sunday, I'd like to shake your hand and thank you for joining me.